growl. I saved my work on the laptop, closed it, and put away the handgun that had been next to me. So far, the alarms hadn't gone off, but I trusted Duke's instincts. He jumped out of his cozy dog bed and waited by the door while I grabbed my rifle and shotgun from their spot near the couch. Looking through the glass door, I noticed dust rising on the road leading to my place through the desert. A small German-made SUV appeared from the dust and stopped just before the creek, a few hundred feet below where I stood. The people inside seemed to be reading my large sign that said, "Do you believe in the hereafter? Come closer without an invitation and you will find out. Private property, keep out." There was also a similar sign in Spanish next to it. My job and my firm ways often attracted trouble from those who had lost out in dealings with me. This isolated part of the Big Bend was known for coyotes helping people cross the desert for farms to the north and big cities to the east, north, and west. We also faced challenges from those moving illegal goods to those same cities. Usually, we let each other be unless someone crossed the line. The sheriff had recommended putting up clear signs after some tried to enter my home, and I had to take action. He mentioned that while a sign might not stop determined people, it could deter those who might be lost and would give me protection when questions arose later. I felt fairly certain that the people causing problems, whether through business or smuggling, didn't drive shiny cars with stickers saying things like, "My child is on the honor roll." I leaned the shotgun against the wall just inside the door but kept the rifle close to me. The only way to reach my strong home is by a path that begins just across the creek. This narrow road was carved into the rock of my small mountain at a steep angle with the help of heavy equipment. It's tight, with a steep drop on one side and rock on the other, featuring a few sharp turns that aren't for the faint of heart. Despite how often I work on the road, it remains rough. The strong winds here blow away the sand and small gravel, and when it does rain, it falls hard. Erosion has revealed uneven granite, so I sometimes need to bring more gravel. I set up a sluice against the mountain and buried pipes beneath the road. These pipes direct water away like small bursts. They help stop the road from washing away. Nature also loosens the gravel and sand on the rock face. Eventually, stones and sometimes larger rocks can fall onto the road. If you have a tall vehicle with big tires, the rocks are just a minor issue, but a regular car can't handle it. Over the years, a few people have ignored the no entry sign and tried to come up. 3 men were angry because they lost their businesses trying to cheat me. There were also some individuals who thought they could use my place for their illegal activities. A few months later, the sheriff's department had to deal with them. Most of the other visitors who traveled the rough 7-mile dirt road respected the sign. They took one look at the challenging path, turned around, and went back. But not the people in the silver SUV. They crossed the creek and drove onto the road. Duke and I stepped onto the rock patio to watch the unexpected guests. I was curious about 2 things. Why would someone ignore such a clear warning, and could the SUV actually make it up the rough road? From what I could see, it looked like an all-wheel drive X6, so perhaps it could if it had enough height. The BMW climbed at a steep angle, reminding me of a plane taking off. Some of my friends with 4-wheel drive trucks struggled with the road's narrowness, slope, and bumpy surface, but my big Jeep handled it well. From where we stood, the SUV's clearance looked tight, but we admired how it made its way up the south side before disappearing around the west of the mountain. We listened carefully, hoping to hear if it had an accident or got stuck. After a few moments of silence, we decided to move around the east side of the house to catch sight of it as it came out along the north side and into the open behind the house. Once the front of the vehicle appeared, Duke and I pressed ourselves against the northeast wall of the house, ready for anything in case someone inside came out unexpectedly. Looking cautiously around the corner, I saw the BMW come out from behind the mountain, drive into the open space, and park about 20 steps from the house. The AR was aimed at the vehicle as it stopped, and Duke, the dog, started to growl loudly. Like his owner, Duke believed everyone was a threat until he knew otherwise. His teeth were visible, and he was ready to protect. The SUV parked facing the house, and the engine was turned off. The windows were dark, and the sun was shining off the windshield, so I couldn't see the people inside. I felt we were in real danger when I noticed Duke by my side. When the back doors flew open and Kid's legs appeared below, Duke suddenly stopped growling, began wagging his tail, barked happily, and trotted over to the SUV. This was strange. His instincts had told him there was no threat and that the people inside were familiar. Maybe it was just one of my friends with a new car, but I remained careful, staying close to the wall and keeping the AR ready. A girl with blonde hair came out from one of the rear doors. She knelt down and called, "Duke!" He ran towards her. A smaller boy rushed out from behind the vehicle, arms open wide, shouting, "Duke! Duke!" I didn't recognize them right away, but Duke was very excited. I shifted my focus back to the SUV and waited. They might be a distraction, but how did they know Duke, and how did he know them? From the corner of my eye, I could see the kids cheering with joy and Duke showering them with affection while they laughed. This was unusual for my big dog, so I briefly turned to get a better look at the children. It took only a moment for my mind to connect the dots. "Oh no, this can't be happening!" Suddenly, the driver's door swung open, drawing my attention back to the SUV. A bare leg appeared below the door, and then messy blonde hair came into view. I held my breath as the hair rose above the door, hoping for the best. When recognition hit me, I gasped, and the AR followed the driver as she stepped out and walked to the front of the SUV. I fought the urge to act and harm her before she could create more trouble, worried that I might accidentally hurt my kids. My kids. They were 5 years older now, but there was no doubt about who they were. Having made that realization, I was torn between running to hug my children or confronting their mother. I didn't move. I just stood still as the boy and girl played with Duke while the woman watched me from behind her large sunglasses. I probably looked pretty intimidating, standing there in old boots, jeans, and a denim shirt, holding a rifle with a pistol on my hip and a serious expression on my face. I hoped the weapons would keep her from causing any trouble, and I wouldn't have to take drastic actions in front of her children, though the thought did cross my mind. "Rob, I know we aren't invited, but can we come over without any trouble?" the woman said, smiling at me. At that moment, the lovely young girl and the boy stopped playing with Duke and looked at me with hopeful eyes. 5 years ago, I promised myself I would keep them out of my life, but holding a grudge against kids who were so young at the time felt unfair, even for someone like me. Besides, I wanted to see them again. "The kids can come over, but you need to keep your hands in the air so I can see you're not hiding anything dangerous," I replied. She laughed, which surprised me. "Go ahead and check me if you want, but I promise I'm here for a good reason," she said, walking toward me with her hands up. "Sure, your promises mean a lot," I said under my breath. Still, I longed to hug my kids, and I figured I could take care of her if it came to that. So I leaned the rifle against the wall and looked back at my kids, who were watching me with hope. Duke ran toward the woman, wagging his tail. I wanted to warn him, but then my daughter called out, "Dad!" I waved them over and they ran to me. I knelt down, picked them both up, and hugged them tightly. The woman bent down to pet Duke and whispered sweet words to him. He wagged his tail and made happy noises in response. I quietly decided to give Duke less of his favorite treats for playing with her. After a moment, my son, Logan, pulled back and looked at me seriously. "Daddy, why did you leave us with that man? He was mean to us. We called your phone so many times, but you didn't answer. Granny and Gramps were looking for you too, but they said you just vanished. They thought I had just abandoned them with someone who could be unkind." That stung. I shot a frustrated glance at the woman, who still seemed more focused on Duke than on my anger. I looked back at my son and explained, sharing how she had clearly put me in a bad place. "Son, you were only 2 then, but Mommy chose that man instead of Daddy, and you all moved into his big house. When I came to see you, you and Grace told me how Daddy Robert bought you things, took you on his boat, and flew you to Disney World on his private plane. You said you were going to the beach that afternoon with Daddy Robert, but maybe you could see me another time." So I gave Mommy the divorce she wanted and moved away, like she asked. No one ever told me he was unkind to you. All I heard from Grandma and Grandpa Sterling was how happy you all were with Daddy Robert, the places he took you and the things he bought. Grace looked at me with her big green eyes and said, "Daddy, we were just kids. We didn't understand that we were picking him over you. We just wanted to go to the beach and do the fun things Mommy promised. You were away a lot, but we loved you and wanted to be with you. We liked going places and getting things, but we didn't want him as our dad, we wanted you. But Mommy said you got upset and left us, so we became a family with him and called him Daddy Robert. Grace made a face, scrunching her forehead and pouting. He was nice at first, but then he drank a lot and yelled at Mommy and us, and he was unkind. How was he unkind, Grace? I asked. Well, like that night he was very drunk and he and Mommy were shouting. We got out of bed and watched from the stairs when he hit Mommy and she fell down. Doss ran to get his bat, I got my tennis racket, and we rushed down to help Mommy. He yelled and grabbed his legs, but then he pushed Doss and me. We were crying and Mommy shouted she would call for help. He yelled bad words at all of us and then left. And did Mommy call for help? Yes. A bunch of nice police officers came and took pictures of us and listened to our story. A doctor checked on Mommy and made her get some tests to see if she was hurt. And they took that unkind man away, Doss chimed in. I looked at a worried Caitlin and shook my head. She looked down at the floor, while I felt upset. So, do you still think that was the right choice for you and the kids, Caitlin? That's what you told me when I confronted you about being with him. I'm sorry, Rob, but I have to do what's right for me and my kids. Remember that? She fought back tears and managed to say, Yes, Rob, I remember, and I think we all know that was a mistake. One of many mistakes I made back then. I want to talk to you about that, but can we do it later? Taking a deep breath, I looked at the kids who were watching closely. I agreed, wanting to protect them from the conversation that could spark anger, and her mood changed instantly. She skillfully shifted the topic to something else. With newfound excitement, she said, The kids and I were so amazed when we saw your house on the mountain. Can we check it out? How did you build it here among all the rocks? Can we see your house now, Daddy? Grace asked, and Doss joined in with the same request. Of course. I'm sorry I haven't been a good host, have I? I bet you all want something cold to drink since it's so hot and dry here. I set the kids down, picked up my things, and led everyone to the front door. I stored my rifle and shotgun in a hidden spot and secured them with a special lock that only I could open. They both wanted soda, so I handed each of them a Dr. Pepper in a plastic cup filled with ice. Caitlin stayed quiet, so I poured her a glass of sweet tea with fresh mint. When she saw it, her eyes filled with emotion. You remembered? I shrugged. Yeah, I remember. We were married for 5 years before you moved on. She looked away, hurt by my words. Maybe that was a low blow, but I felt frustrated. The kids stood in the middle of the open space that combined the living room, dining area, and kitchen. They were excitedly pointing at the thick glass wall that offered a view of the mountains. They also looked through the sliding glass doors toward the wide, dry land of the desert. All the glass was strong and safe, able to withstand heavy hits. A steel curtain could come down to provide extra protection and block the view outside. The floors in the house were made of large red tiles, except for some exposed granite that added character to the living room where chairs and couches surrounded it. A patio wrapped around the east and south sides of the house and turned into a covered porch at the southwest corner. It had an area for a barbecue, smoker, grill, and a small oven outside. There was a sturdy wall made of adobe on that side, shielding us from the hot summer sun and cold winter wind, making it comfortable to enjoy year-round. A long counter stretched along the wall. About 2/3 down was a double sink, and in the corner there was an old storage box. When you opened it, you found cooking supplies, spices, and utensils tucked inside. Under a covered area, there was a large wooden table that could seat 16 people, along with a taller table with 4 high chairs. I love to cook outside, so I have everything I need right here. A tall wall surrounded the entire patio, making it hard for anyone below to shoot up at someone on the patio. This wall offered good protection, allowing someone to hide behind it safely. In the middle of the patio stood a wheeled brass cannon facing the road and creek. Nearby, 3 cannonballs were stacked in a holder, and there was a sturdy waterproof box next to the cannon. This box held powder and wadding, along with extra cannonballs and a rammer. A soft cushion on top made it a nice spot to sit. Scattered around were folding chairs, and 2 cozy couches formed a gathering space near the cannon, each paired with a glass coffee table. The house was built from adobe bricks and covered in stucco. The thick walls helped keep the house cool in summer and warm in winter. Inside, the walls were framed and protected by strong fiberglass panels, which were then covered with wooden panels. The adobe and panels were so tough that it would take a very powerful bullet to get through. There were openings in the walls at shoulder height in each room. These could be used for safety if needed. This design had been common in homes and forts for many years, so I thought it would be a good idea for my own home. When I asked everyone what their favorite part of the house was, Doss said he loved the cannon. Grace liked the big fireplace in the living room, and Caitlin was a fan of the large shower in the master bathroom. The shower had several shower heads and a big overhead shower, too. She jokingly asked if I had gatherings there, but her smile faded when I raised my eyebrow and shrugged in response. The master suite was spacious, taking up the entire west side of the house. The bathroom, sinks, and dressing area were along the north side. There were 2 smaller bedrooms sharing a bathroom on the south side, and next to the shower was a room with a metal door. I showed them everything, but chose not to share details about the metal door. My curious daughter asked, "Daddy, what's in this room?" "That's a special room," I said. "The door is made of metal and locked because I keep my tools inside. In this area, there are not many law officers, so I need to protect myself. Sometimes people who don't follow the law come here, so I have what I need to stay safe from anyone who might try to harm me or Duke." Grace seemed curious, and Doss was bouncing with excitement. "Daddy, can we see your tools? Please, Daddy." I glanced at their mom for her okay. She nodded but looked a bit worried. The door had a special lock that required my thumbprint. I pressed it and waited for the sound that meant it was open. If I allowed Doss, I was sure he would spend all day in there, looking at each tool and asking questions about what they did. I gave him short answers and let him hold a few items while his mom looked surprised and a little shocked. "Are you getting ready for a big fight?" she asked dramatically. "Not really, but if things get rough with some tough people, I want to be prepared." "Okay, I get it, but do you really need things like rocket launchers? Are they even allowed?" "I believe in the right to own these tools, so yes, they are." She shook her head, unsure, so I invited everyone outside, saying I would show them more interesting things. Doss left a bit sadly, but Grace was happy, and Caitlin looked like she thought I was preparing for something big. Once we were outside and the door was locked, I said, "I call this my desert lair. I have another spot in the mountains that I call my mountain lair." "What's a lair, Daddy?" Grace asked. "A lair is a safe place where you can stay. Animals like bears and lions have lairs where they go when they need to rest or take care of their young. If you try to go into a lair, it can be dangerous, so I put up a sign to keep people away from mine." That answered the kids' questions, but while she stayed quiet, it looked like it gave Caitlin something to think about. I took them to the garage and storage area where the water pump and tank were. We talked about the underground water level here and how I chose this spot because the rock formations let me dig a shallow well to get fresh water. The granite the house is on is different from the taller rock you see to the north. Many years of falling rocks, gravel, and dirt filled the space between the 2 formations. That's how I was able to dig the well and find water easily, and also why I have a good system for waste management. Those 2 factors are rare, which is why you don't see many houses on granite mountains like this one. "Where does the water from the shower, bath, and sinks go?" Caitlin asked. "The gray water is stored in metal tanks outside. I use it to water the plants around the house and the garden behind the garage." She nodded, pleased. The kids and I talked about climbing the taller mountain a bit north and hiking in the desert below. I explained that exploring the mountain or desert needed a lot of planning and gear, but we could start by walking along the creek bed. They liked that idea, but Mom worried, "What about the smugglers?" "I have a 2-seat mule. We can pack the tent, sleeping bags, water jugs, and cooler in it and drive to a good spot to set up. We'll still be within my safe area, and I'll bring protection, so we'll be fine." She was about to respond when Doss complained his stomach was growling. His mom laughed and said that was because he used so much energy he needed to eat often. I suggested we take my Jeep to eat at a place near the highway. Caitlin mentioned she needed to use the bathroom first, and Grace agreed. They rushed inside. Doss asked if he could just pee outside, and I laughed. We both did. Grace came back quickly and rolled her eyes, saying it would take her mom a bit longer to get ready. We stood on the patio and chatted for a few minutes, looking out at the winding dirt road that leads back through the desert to the highway. Das told me I lived far down a bumpy road. I explained I did that on purpose because I didn't want many visitors, but I was glad they came. They hugged me and said they were too. Caitlin joined us after a few minutes, looking bright and nice. She smiled at me, tossed her hair, and asked if she looked okay for going to the restaurant. I nodded and tried to look away. I wondered how she would catch the attention of the locals. I still felt some frustration towards her, but it had eased as the day went on. After all, she had given me 2 lovely kids, and now they were here visiting. I wasn't sure what her intentions were unless it was simple they wanted to see me and she was willing to handle my feelings to bring them. Yeah, why are they here? I need to stop getting distracted and figure out what is going on. A woman like Caitlin doesn't just take her kids for a long drive from River Oaks to a place called God's Junkyard without a reason. I hope she will tell me her reason when we have the talk she mentioned for later. The kids were excited when I backed my Desert Sand Wrangler Rubicon out of the garage. The engine rumbled, and country music was playing loudly. They climbed into the back with a little help from Mom, who needed a bit of aid herself to get into my tall Jeep, even with the step. I turned the music down so we could chat while we drove down the winding road and crossed the creek. I stopped briefly, picked up my phone, and turned on the safety alerts. When the kids asked what I was doing, I told them I had sensors around our property to let me know when someone was coming near. Caitlin looked at me oddly but didn't say anything. 15 minutes later, we arrived at La Kiva. I was ready to help the kids out, but they eagerly jumped down. Caitlin got out too, and we all breathed in the wonderful smells coming from the outdoor grills. Grace asked, "What is this place, Dad?" "It's a local spot called La Kiva. They serve great grilled burgers, steaks, chicken, and tacos. You'll really like it," I replied, leading them to the entrance as they walked down the stairs into the underground restaurant. The usual crowd at the big table by the bar was looking at the kids until they noticed their mom in her stylish outfit. Caitlin and Grace paused when they spotted the rough-looking group and waited for me to join them. Doss happily said, "Dad, this is a really cool place. It feels like a cave with tables." The curious looks faded once I arrived. El Coyote shouted, "Dad, you have kids now. What's going on? Come over here, Saul. You have to introduce them." After greeting everyone, the kids appeared unbothered by the scruffy group at the table. I shared how the Humanos were the original settlers in this area, and that we used the Spanish versions of their names in La Kiva to honor them. I introduced each person. Rene, the tidy bartender and manager, along with his lovely wife Berta, did not have to join this tradition, but they also had Humano names. By the time I finished, Caitlin had won over the whole group, and they insisted we sit with them. The kids ordered another Dr. Pepper, while Caitlin and I enjoyed some cold drinks. Renee took their food orders and headed to the kitchen. "Aren't you going to eat?" Caitlin asked. El Gato chuckled and replied, "He doesn't make regular orders. He has a set order instead. If he wants something different, he signals Renee, but that doesn't happen often." "Hey, Catman, didn't you see me signal him just now? I'm trying something new, but I think my kids should taste the stuffed jalapenos here, don't you?" Gato laughed, nodded, and asked, "Why don't you treat us all, big spender?" "He just did. He gave him a couple of bills. You know Saul takes care of his friends," said El Chaparral, also known as Roadrunner. El Toro laughed. "Sure, he owns the place. He can afford it. Just look at how much he makes off us." "Bull, if I lived off what I earn from you lazy folks, I'd be in trouble. Luckily, some honest, hard-working people will come in a few hours. That's when we make enough to keep the place open." Caitlin was watching our joking with a concerned look. "You own La Kiva?" Bull explained. "He bought it 2 years ago. The previous owner had trouble, and his kids didn't want to run it, so it closed down. Saul bought the whole thing, removed all the signs, built a simple fence so no one could see the RV spots, and reopened the bar and grill as a private club. He didn't know much about running it, but he knew what he liked and hired Renee and Berta. They turned this place into the local favorite. Saul doesn't advertise because the Big Bend is a popular tourist spot in Texas, and people from Houston were taking over, and they were nothing compared to the visitors from the north who would call everything charming while complaining about the heat. So far, we've kept this place quiet thanks to our benefactor, who requires that you have a member sponsor you before applying for membership in this private club. All right, Doc, enough about that, Coyote interjected. Your voice might carry out of the Kiva and reach a group of noisy visitors from Connecticut who might rush up to see our little cafe. The kids were bored by the adults' talk and wandered off to explore what we jokingly called the veranda, the shelf extending from the cave along the creek bank. I had put in an air curtain to keep the cool air inside, but it was nice outside now, so it wasn't needed. Are there fish in that creek? Doss called out. Not really, son, Bull replied loudly. It stays dry most of the year, and no fish can grow quickly enough during the rainy season to get big enough to catch. Ask your dad to take you to the Rio tomorrow. He knows all the best fishing spots there. He always brings back big catches when he goes fishing, though he doesn't go often enough. Yeah, Saul, when are we going to have another fish fry? Asked Gatto. It won't be soon. I'm heading to the Davis Mountains and north this weekend. I'll be gone for a week or two, maybe after that. The discussion at the table shifted to the cool spring weather, the many flowers, and what it might mean for the future. As they chatted, their Texas accents popped up, showing their education and intelligence, which Caitlin noticed. She looked at me with a puzzled expression, so I quietly explained while they kept talking. They're not quite what they seem, are they? Bull, or Doc, has a PhD in geology and just retired from Sully. He's my close friend and helps me with oil investments. No one knows more about what's below and above the ground in West Texas than Doc. Coyote is an oil man from Houston. He's had ups and downs with his fortunes, moving to his ranch near Terlingua, where the little money he has left goes further than in River Oaks. He sold me his plane after his wife passed away, saying he had no one to visit anymore and wanted it to go to someone who would use it. Gatto, also called Catman, was a land developer in the DFW area. He moved down here 20 years ago but couldn't resist buying some land he got a good deal on between Fort Davis and McDonald Observatory. He sold it in pieces to friends, including me, and that's where I'm going this weekend. Chaparral is a Mexican whose living situation is unclear, but he's important because he understands what's happening across the river and warns us of any trouble. He probably has more gadgets than I do and isn't afraid to use them. The quiet one is known as El Saguaro, like the cactus. His name means something like guardian because he's always watchful. He sees and hears everything, and we've all seen him react in tough situations. Doc thinks we should call him Peligroso, which means risky because he's quite something when action is needed. We think he's from the military or police, but he has never told us, and it's not polite to ask. I like them, she said softly. That added some points to her score with me, though she still had a lot to make up for her earlier actions. Food arrived, the kids came back, and they ate voraciously. I enjoyed my center-cut sirloin with asparagus and a salad, nodding to the chef, who smiled and came from the kitchen. Doss raved about his hamburger and bun. Grace said her fajitas were the best she had ever tasted, and she had no idea tortillas could be this good. Caitlin chimed in, Berta, this is the best grilled salmon I've ever had, and those grilled vegetables are amazing. What ingredients do you use to get that flavor? Berta listened closely, thanked the kids, and told Caitlin, I could share, but then my boss would have to make it a secret. Those are his special ingredients. Better not tell me then. I wouldn't want to give him a reason, Caitlin replied sadly. This little joke got the sympathy and support of everyone at the table, plus Renee and Berta. They all looked at me with disapproval. I shrugged. It's a long story, best not shared. Besides, she knows I wouldn't harm her over something like that. The table fell silent, which was unusual for such talkative people. I don't usually share much about my personal life. Just then we heard the loud sound of kids running down the stairs with parents shouting, Don't run! You might get hurt! 3 excited kids between 6 and 11 years old burst into the room. The 2 younger ones ran right to Tia, Berta, and Uncle Rene, who scooped them up. The 10-year-old girl, wearing a white dress and sandals, came to me, kissed my cheek, and settled into my lap. Only after sitting did she notice the new kids at the table who were frowning at her. Tio Rob, who are they? She asked. Yolanda, meet Grace and Logan, who we call Dos. This is their mom, Caitlin. Grace and Dos are my children, and their mom is my ex-wife. Grace, Dos, Caitlin, This is my girlfriend, Yolanda Villarreal, and her mom, Rosa. Those two kids over there are Juan and Pancho. They belong to Imelda, who is Rosa's sister, and Francisco, who is beside them. Did everyone understand? I don't think they really did, but Yolanda got off my lap, walked over to Dos and Grace, curtsied, and introduced herself politely. She then invited them to explore with her, showing them all the special rooms and caves of La Kiva. They quickly said yes, and all five ran off together. I stood up from my seat at the end of the table and helped Frank move a table so they could join us. I stayed at the end with Rosa next to me and Imelda on the other side. Frankie was beside Caitlin. Caitlin looked at Rosa nervously, and Rosa looked back the same way. I sipped my cold drink and kept a calm face. The new guests ordered my usual, and we enjoyed beers or margaritas while chatting about upcoming events in our quiet corner of Texas. Caitlin remarked, "You all have a lot happening for a place that seems so empty." Doc smiled and shared some information. There are about 9,300 people living in Brewster County, mostly in Alpine, Marfa, Marathon, Lajitas, and Terlingua. Alpine has about 6,000 people, Marfa has nearly 2,000, and Lajitas, Terlingua, and Marathon have 200 to 300 each. That leaves about 600 tough folks scattered across an area bigger than the state of Connecticut. When you don't have many neighbors, you learn to appreciate the ones you have, even if they are a bit difficult like El Sol or any of these other old fellows. I'm just glad there are young people and families around. Sometimes this place feels a bit wild until Rosa, Imelda, Pancho, and their kids show up. Caitlin smiled brightly and said, "Oh, I don't believe that. Everyone here has their own charm." This made others shake their heads and say, "You don't know us very well." But it also encouraged Doc to buy a round for everyone. The newcomers enjoyed their food, and we kept the drinks coming. At some point, Frankie put a quarter in the jukebox and asked his wife to dance to a classic Tejano song. Rosa quickly asked me to dance, and she snuggled close as we moved. Another song played, and we stayed on the dance floor, giving her a chance to ask about my past family. To my surprise, El Saguaro, who hardly spoke or interacted, took Caitlin onto the dance floor. He showed us that his skills in movement were impressive. They looked great together. The tall blonde and the strong brown-eyed man danced like they had practiced for years. I felt a hint of jealousy and led Rosa back to the table. Caitlin and Saguaro kept talking, and then Saguaro played a cumbia song. After a quick lesson, Caitlin danced with skill, making Rosa look a bit jealous. Everyone knew Rosa had a crush on Saguaro, but he hadn't given her much reason to believe there was hope. "Come on, Rob, let's show them how it's done," Rosa challenged. I could dance okay, but I knew I wouldn't impress anyone like Saguaro, who seemed to be a natural. When a new song began, Rosa put on a lively show. I did my best to keep up, but wow, she really could move. Saguaro was focused on Rosa, matching her steps perfectly. I looked at Caitlin and signaled for her to step aside with me. They didn't notice us. We sort of danced while watching them, each lost in their dance-off. The song ended and everyone cheered. They laughed and looked for their partners, but the next song began playing. Rosa glanced at Saguaro. He stepped forward and held out his hand, and she moved close to him as they danced together smoothly. As I watched Rosa's happy moment unfold, Caitlin took my hand. When I turned to her, she got close and began to sway with the music. Against my better judgment, I held her close. I tried to keep some space between us, but she wouldn't allow it. Being near her brought back memories of the warm sun on the beach, and I could feel her trembling. Her hair still smelled like lilacs, just as it had years ago, and I got lost in the memory. For a moment, the 5 difficult years that had passed seemed to fade away. Instead, I felt a sense of peace, having my children nearby and this familiar person in my arms. When she looked up at me, her face so full of emotion, her eyes silently asking, it felt right. I was tempted to lean in closer, drawn by the feelings we once shared. As I leaned in, she closed her eyes and waited. I felt her breath, but then I stopped, realizing my mistake. Pulling back, I rested my chin on her head and we simply danced. She held me tighter, and soon I felt her tears against my shirt. When the music ended, she hurried off to the restroom. I grabbed another drink, brushing off the curious glances. "Renee, let's get another round. I'll help serve." After that, I didn't dance again, and neither did Caitlin. Instead, we sat with the others, drank beer, and joined in the lively conversation around the table. Caitlin wasn't a big drinker, but she managed to keep up with the rest of us for a while. Eventually, though, with most of the table tipsy and the kids fast asleep in the spare room, El Toro couldn't resist asking the question. "So, you two, what's the story? You've got two great kids. You seem perfect together, and I can tell there's something there between you. Why are you out here in the middle of nowhere and she's in Houston?" Caitlin looked at him, still a bit tipsy, but she answered calmly. "Once upon a time, there was a young woman, sheltered and inexperienced. She got caught up in the lies of someone who took advantage of her. She was told her husband didn't care, that he wanted to be away from her, off with other people. In her loneliness and anger, she made some bad decisions and ended up in a situation she never thought she'd be in." She paused, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. Once she realized her mistakes, she felt trapped and thought there was no way out. She believed the false promises of a better life, chasing dreams that were never real. He also promised to be a loving and caring husband who would support her and her children every night and weekend. When her husband, who had been away, came back and confronted her, she told him she wanted a divorce. She still loved him but believed it was the right choice for herself and the kids. Her heartbroken husband agreed when their children, who had been guided in what to say, expressed their wish to stay with their mother and Robert. He signed the divorce papers prepared by Robert's lawyer and left. No one knew where he went, but a few months later, Robert's situation began to crumble. It turned out that her ex-husband had been the key to the company's success, something Robert resented as much as he resented his father's respect for his rival. Robert had been sending the husband on long trips so he could pursue the unsuspecting wife, which, unfortunately for him, had worked out. Eager to show his business skills, Robert invested in projects that failed, draining the company's resources. He played fast and loose with business practices, kept false records, and broke many rules. Less than a year later, the board chairman insisted on a thorough investigation. Before it was done, the FBI showed up about his business dealings in the Middle East and Africa. By the time their investigation concluded a year later, Robert had lost his job and was heading to prison for various serious crimes. Before any of this happened, the wife had married Robert. At first, he was caring and generous, spending money on her and the children and taking them on trips. While things were not perfect, he seemed to keep his promises for a while. However, when difficulties arose, he blamed her and her ex-husband. As his situation worsened, he became abusive, which she mistakenly thought she deserved. But when he turned to the children, she called for help. She filed for divorce right after leaving the hospital the next day. Fortunately, she received half of what he had just before he lost the rest in court. Feeling ashamed, she sold the house, moved her kids into a new place, and tried to make up for her past choices. Years went by, but a problem remained. She still had feelings for her first husband, and the kids made it harder by asking when they could see their dad. Determined to find closure, she hired a private investigator who traced him back to the Big Bend and Davis Mountains. She packed their bags, loaded everyone into her SUV, and drove from Houston to Alpine. After asking for directions at a store in Study Butte, she found the man she had hurt living in a remote place atop a granite mountain. Even though he arrived without being invited, he was friendly and polite. He treated everyone well, even the wife who had hurt him. And here we are, eating and drinking at La Kiva. The table stayed quiet for a long time, as if everyone was too scared to speak after hearing her story. Finally, I decided to say something. If I remember correctly, the wife of 4 years, who is quite smart, encouraged her husband to accept a big promotion, even though he warned her it would mean a lot of travel. When she complained about him being away too much, he reminded her of that warning and even offered to quit to find another job. This was a big deal since he was part owner of the company and knew it might fail without him. He knew his business partner, Robert, wasn't capable of managing things well. He also warned her that Robert didn't like him because their fathers were best friends, and he had been named after Robert's father before Robert was born. Robert's father saw potential in him and taught him everything about the business. But he also saw that his son lacked strength of character. So when he retired, he made Robert CEO, but kept much of the power with the chairman and another vice president who was Robert's rival. This caused more tension between them. The husband also warned his wife that Robert was interested in her, partly to get back at him and partly because he found her attractive. She dismissed his concerns, and when he became suspicious, she, along with her lover, lied to him. It was only when he confronted her with proof that she admitted the truth, saying she was acting in the best interest of their children and herself. She and her lover even turned the kids against him, instructing them on what to say to hurt him. The husband was crushed. Feeling heartbroken and abandoned by those he cared for, he decided to leave his family and the business. Fortunately, he was clever enough to sell his shares back to Robert before he left, which pleased Robert at first. But soon he realized that it was the husband who had been key to the company's success, and that his shady actions might come to light. Did the husband speak to the chairman, a retired Air Force general, about Robert's dealings with some people overseas? Yes, he did. Did he suggest that an audit might be necessary? Yes, he did that too. Was he unfaithful while away? No, he remained loyal to his wife, even after everything. Now, with all that settled, I think I'll take the kids and our storyteller back to my house to sleep. Rob was sitting on the patio with a cup of coffee as the sun rose. He spent the first hour lost in thought, going over what had happened the day before and the night before. He especially remembered Caitlin's story about her past choices from 5 years ago. He also thought about how his kids had embraced him and his unusual way of life. A part of him wanted to confront Caitlin, to make her talk about her betrayal and take responsibility for her actions. But she appeared ready to share everything and seemed to have accepted her part in it, at least to some extent, in front of strangers. Although confronting her might satisfy his need for answers, he worried that it could cause her and the kids to leave and return to Houston or wherever they lived now. He was just starting to reconnect with his children, and Caitlin seemed genuinely sorry and willing to work things out while still being her lively self. So why risk pushing them away? Choosing what to do was tough. The first choice was simple: keep his kids with him. The next was harder. Should he confront Caitlin, risking her leaving with the kids, or should he ignore the past and try to keep things friendly, focusing on showing them the beautiful Big Bend area he loved? By the time Caitlin joined him with her coffee, he had made his choice and started planning their day. Then he remembered they hadn't talked about how long she intended to stay. Was it a few days, a week, or were they heading back today? He decided to ask. Rob, I took the kids out of school and set them up with a homeschooling plan so we could be here. Actually, it was their idea. They insisted on coming to see their dad. Grace, who remembers you better because she's older, was really eager, but little Doss wanted it even more. We didn't know if you would want to see us, so we have no set plans. We're here for as long as you want us. Why do you ask? Do you want us to leave? No, I don't. The kids seem happy to be here. Their excitement about seeing me and my different lifestyle, including my unique friends, surprises me. This place is so different from River Oaks, yet they seem to fit in well. What about me? He sighed, took a deep breath, looked away, then back into her beautiful blue-green eyes, and sighed again. Once I got past my frustration, I realized you seem, well, different. You seem more confident and focused. I appreciate that you are owning up to what happened between us. If you had made excuses, you would probably be on your way somewhere else. How could I not? It's my fault. I was young, naive, and made poor choices. I turned my back on my true partner and ended up with a person who had no sense of right or wrong. If I could find a genie to grant me a wish, I would go back to when Robert first approached me. I would slap him, walk away, and tell you what he said. That's nice to hear, I guess. But there isn't a genie. Still, I'm glad to know you wouldn't do it again. Now, since you're with me, let's talk about today, tomorrow, and the whole week. How do you feel about some sightseeing, hiking, and a camping trip? We can leave after breakfast and come back late tomorrow afternoon. She wasn't too excited until the kids ran out and started talking excitedly about the idea. I explained the park rules about dogs needing to be on a leash to Duke, and he decided he would rather stay back and take care of the house. Even if it meant using the dog door to get to the shed instead of the house, the shed had its own comforts, like an extra bed and food and water. Soon, I had everything and everyone loaded into the Jeep, and we were on our way to the Chisos Basin. For the first part of the drive, they talked about how rocky and empty the land looked, but liked the distant blue mountains. When we reached the basin, they were amazed by the small trees around the tall cliffs. After we set up our campsite with a 2-room tent, sleeping bags, water, ice chests for food and drinks, and cooking supplies, we packed water for our hike and started on the trail to the window. The window is a spot where water flows through a gap in the rocks and down to the desert below. It's a nice walk, and the view of the valleys and mountains is incredible. The hike there is downhill, so the return is uphill. We stopped for water a few times along the way and made it back to camp just in time for lunch, which included sandwiches, chips, apple slices, and soda. We talked about what to do in the afternoon and decided to start at the Visitors Center to learn about the plants and animals in the Chihuahuan Desert and Big Bend National Park. After that, we headed to Castellon, stopping at lookouts to take photos of the colorful rock layers. We then followed the river west to Santa Elena Canyon. They may not be as famous as the Grand Canyon, but the tall walls of the canyons along the Rio Grande are really impressive. Instead of turning back, I took them further up the river to a fishing spot I knew well. After a short walk north, I showed them how the river split into 2 small streams with a rocky island in the middle. We crossed the first stream, which was only a few inches deep, by jumping from one big stone to another. We paused on the island to appreciate the quiet beauty around us and talk about how the gentle streams here became rushing water in the narrow canyons. Next, we walked to the north end of the island and hopped across the stones to the other side. We followed a well-trodden path along the river with a steep rock wall rising above us. When we reached the spot where the 2 streams came together again and flowed faster, I pointed to a patch of green water near the shore and shared how I had caught many catfish there. Doss asked if we could return to go fishing. I said we could, but not for a few weeks, if he wanted to stay that long. He assured me he did, and Grace agreed. We walked back upstream to where we first crossed. I paused to give a quick lesson about borders, boundaries, and laws. "So, what country are we standing in, Grace?" She looked confused for a moment, but then said excitedly, "Mexico." I nodded and smiled. "That's right. Did you know we broke a federal law by crossing these little streams?" Her eyes widened and she shook her head. Doss and Caitlin looked worried. "It seems strange, doesn't it? I could face trouble for walking across this shallow river to fish, and someone from Mexico could face trouble for walking over here to fish. Lawmakers create rules that apply to everyone, no matter if it makes sense or not. Think about the border wall they want to build. How upset do you think people will be who take float trips through the canyons if the paths are blocked off? How frustrated will the fishermen become if they can't reach the river along the long stretch from El Paso to Brownsville? What about those who fish on Lake Amistad, which was a project shared between Mexico and America? Do you think they'll be happy if it's fenced in? And what about ranchers who will have fences far from the river because that's the width of the floodplain there? Do you think they will be pleased to lose good land for their cattle and the chance to enjoy the river? Sometimes what seems like a good idea for some people isn't good for others in different areas. That's why people who live here don't always agree with every law or government rule. Many laws that work for big cities like Philadelphia, New York, or Los Angeles don't fit the needs of places like Terlingua or Study Butte. To see it another way, the border between Mexico and California, Arizona, and New Mexico is just an imaginary line in the sand. You can put up a fence or wall along that line, but neither country gives up any of its land. You know, like landowners do when they put up a fence. In Texas, the border is in the middle of the Rio Grande River, and you cannot build a wall right down the center of the river, especially not in lakes like Amistad and Falcon that are also part of it. So if we want to build a wall on Texas land, we'll lose access to some American land. As you can see, we would have to keep the wall back from the river's flood area, or it could be washed away in floods. Here, it would need to be built on that flat land up high, but there are deep canyons that cut through this area. No one can put up a wall down the steep sides, across the bottom, and up the other steep side without ruining a lot of land with heavy machinery. Even if they could, the road would be in a place that is hard to reach, and we wouldn't be able to use it. Sure, we all want safety at the border, but are we ready to support making the Border Patrol bigger and giving them the tools and resources they need? Even if there is a wall, determined people will still find ways to get over, under, or around it. We will still need a strong border patrol to keep it effective and to catch those who get past it. Now let's head back into America, and you tell me how different it feels. We took Old Maverick Road, which is dirt, back toward Study Butte. We explored an old shelter, saw the rock chimneys, and then returned to our camp in the basin. Dinner was hot dogs with canned chili, chips, canned peaches, and apple juice. We cleaned up and changed into our sleepwear in the campground bathrooms, then sat around the concrete table at our camp, waiting for the main event. We sang a few campfire songs to pass the time, then sat quietly as it grew darker. We noticed the sounds around the campground fade, and the nighttime sounds of the creatures in the basin becoming clearer. I hoped everyone was listening and not going to bed. This was going to be too special to miss. Soon it was completely dark, and the stars were beautiful. In this part of West Texas, with low humidity and little light from the city, there were so many more visible stars than in the crowded areas of Texas, especially in Houston, where there is a lot of humidity and light pollution. The stars were easy to spot, and we spent an hour searching for the constellations we could remember. Around 9:30, the moment we had been waiting for began. A soft light appeared over the mountains that marked the eastern border of the basin. We were all amazed as an enormous orange moon rose slowly above the landscape, getting bigger until it was much larger than we had ever seen, lighting up the eastern sky. Gasps and "Oh, Daddy, it's amazing" were all I heard as they held their hands over their hearts in awe. After the moon rose above the valley, it looked enormous and bright, like an orange planet from a movie. Gradually it climbed higher, returning to its silver glow. We discussed the science behind this beautiful sight, and soon the kids crawled into their sleeping bags, tired after a long day. Caitlin joined them quickly while I settled into a chair, enjoying the fresh air and the lovely display of nature, which still amazed me, even though I had seen it many times before. The kids were in one side of the divided tent. My sleeping bag was against one wall, and Caitlin's against the other. Later, I found myself waking up, surprised to be close to Caitlin. She was snuggled against me, and I could feel her warmth. When I tried to move away, she held my hand tightly in her sleep, clearly wanting to stay close. My head knew it was better to keep some distance, but my heart enjoyed the moment. We were in our separate sleeping bags, after all. I wrapped my arms around her and drifted back to sleep. I woke to the sound of giggles, a delightful way to start the day. However, what made me uneasy was their reaction to how close Caitlin and I were. When I tried to shift away again, she sleepily responded, holding me tighter. "Mommy, I need to go to the bathroom, and so does Doss," Grace whispered. "Can we go alone since you're both still in bed?" Knowing the restroom was just a short walk away and the campground was quiet, I told them they could go, but to shout if they needed anything. I tried to get free again, but Caitlin still held my hand close, choosing to stay pressed against me. "Caitlin, the kids are awake and will want breakfast soon. We should get up," I said. "Oh, do we have to? This feels so good," she replied sleepily. Many thoughts crossed my mind, but I stayed quiet. As much as I didn't want to admit it, this was one of the best feelings I'd had in a long time. "Come on, we need to be responsible parents," I encouraged her before finally breaking free to get dressed. She turned onto her stomach with a happy sound, so I gave her a gentle nudge and started to tickle her. That did the trick, and soon she was up. I hurried outside to use the restroom myself. The kids met me just as I arrived. I told them to wait, and we walked back together. For breakfast, we would enjoy cereal with milk, bananas, or strawberries, and orange juice. Caitlin came out wearing a casual outfit that looked perfect for a morning outdoors. She looked cheerful, and it was the happiest I had seen her since we arrived. She leaned on my shoulder, took my orange juice and banana, and finished them both. I was annoyed, not because I was thirsty or hungry, but because it felt like she was claiming them as hers. "Last night doesn't change anything," I said firmly. She smiled, knowing it really did. As we drove away from the basin toward our stops for the day, Langford Hot Springs, Boquillas Canyon, and Boquillas del Carmen, I thought about what happened during the night. I tried to tell myself it meant nothing since we were just sleeping together for warmth. I was managing to convince myself until she put her bare feet on the dashboard. She had chosen to wear a light dress that showed off her lovely legs and shoulders. I was trying to focus on driving, but the sight brought up feelings I wasn't ready for, especially when she propped her feet with pink toenails on my dash, revealing even more of her legs. "Caitlin, is that really the best choice for hiking? Maybe you should think about changing," I suggested. She gave me a sly smile. "Oh no, this is nice and cool, and I have comfortable shoes in my bag for when we walk. Why, don't you like it?" Her question felt a bit teasing. She shifted in her seat, showing more of her outfit, and playfully touched my leg. I almost lost control and swerved off the road. I forced myself to focus, took a few deep breaths, and looked around to spot the scenery to distract myself. Suddenly, her feet were resting in my lap, and she asked brightly, "Do you like this pink on my toes? I thought it matched my dress." I refused to look down, knowing it would distract me even more. Then her heel brushed against me, moving slightly. I knew that if I reacted, it would only encourage her, so I said, "The pink looks great. Now please move your feet before we end up in a ditch." She laughed, rubbed a bit more, then slowly pulled her feet back and tucked them under herself. Well, that was unexpected. This was the lively person I once found irresistible during our best days. Today was going to be quite a long day if she kept this up. I focused on the road while Mom chatted with her kids in the back seat about the guidebooks they were looking at. Grace was sharing stories about the hot springs, and Doss joined in, talking about riding donkeys to a small town in Mexico. Driving gave me time to think about Caitlin and our kids without having to face them, especially her. 5 years ago, when I confronted Caitlin about the affair, I met a cold and hard person who showed no respect. She looked me straight in the eye and told me she had fallen in love with Robert. They were living together while I was away, and she insisted we should get a divorce so they could marry. She shrugged off my anger and said it was best for her and the kids, claiming I was never around anyway. Even now I can close my eyes and hear those hurtful words, feeling all the pain and anger I felt back then. But when I look to my right, I see a more grown-up version of the girl I fell in love with. I hear her sweet voice as she charms our kids. Somehow I can't see the person she was before. She has been kind, apologetic, playful, and charming. Today she seems lively and happy, which makes me wonder about the person I once knew. The question remains, is that old person still there, hiding and waiting? Were her sweet gestures just a way to keep me off guard? So far I see no signs of that. In the past I watched her grow angry and distant with each trip, eventually becoming cold and unkind. Everything about her then felt so different from the young woman I married. So why does the woman beside me seem so much like the girl I once loved? Did I slip into a different time? Is this real or just an act? I shake off the thoughts and listen to the fun conversation in the back seat. I start adding details to make their discussion about history and geography easier for the kids to enjoy. When we arrive at Rio Grande Village a little after 11, and Doss says he's starving, we decide to cross into Mexico. We plan to shop a bit and eat at one of the small cafes in Villa Boquillas. The Border Patrol agents at the crossing change from time to time, and today we have Guillermo, known as Willie, who is a regular at La Kiva. In fact, most of them are. Maybe people enjoy the food and company, or perhaps they like getting a free beer and burger, or maybe they appreciate a thank you for their service when they arrive. I introduce Grace and Doss as my kids, and Caitlin as their mom. I confirm their citizenship since they do not have passports. After a surprised look, Willie waves us through. Captain Pablo waits in his small boat for a signal. With a tip of $2, as Robert Earl Keen mentions in a song, he rows us across and helps us pick the best way to get into the village. Doss wants to ride the donkey, but the ladies prefer the cart. Since I am too big for the donkey, I rent a horse. We all get on and head to the best cafe in Boquillas, I promise. My wife and her mother are great cooks, Captain Pablo boasts. It turned out his wife and mother-in-law really were excellent cooks. We enjoyed a selection of dishes they suggested, starting with chicken soup, followed by cheese enchiladas, crispy beef tacos, stewed meat, rice and beans, along with the best corn tortillas I've ever tasted. And I've eaten a lot of them. To make it harder to walk, they served tres leches cake for dessert. I worried my horse might not carry my weight, so we explored the town for souvenirs to help walk off our feast. There are many things in Mexico that you cannot bring back to the U.S., But we found enough clothes, trinkets, jewelry, and wooden crafts that I thought we might need another donkey for the trip back. Captain Pablo looked happy, but a bit worried when he saw us return with so many items. I gave him a generous tip for showing us his wife's cafe and another for fitting all our purchases in the boat safely. La Migra greeted us when we landed on the other side and helped the kids and Caitlin get off the boat. Caitlin gave him a tip as she stepped off, followed by a friendly kiss on the cheek to thank him for his help. I said playfully, "What about me? No help?" He replied with a laugh, "Ah, not you. I'm afraid your kiss would be like the beautiful ladies." "In your dreams! I would never kiss someone like you." Turning back to Caitlin while ignoring the bags at the shore, Willie asked, "Do you and the kids have anything to declare?" Not understanding the question, they stared at him blankly. I jumped in, saying, "Sure, we had a fantastic time in Mexico, ate a wonderful meal, and thank you for your help, officer. Oh, and I brought back 2 bottles of tequila that I need to pay tax on." He told me the amount I owed, took it, placed a sticker on the bottles, and turned back to Caitlin and the kids. "Let's not leave this stuff by the river. I can help you pack it in the Jeep." "See you tonight, my friend," he said with a smile and a friendly handshake as he closed the door. "That's fine. The drinks are on me tonight. Thank you very much." Telling him there would be free drinks at La Kiva was not really a favor, since he and other officers always got one for free when they were off duty. It's important to show appreciation for those who work to keep us safe in our quiet area, away from more serious problems. "Okay, we visited Mexico. Who wants to go relax in the hot springs?" I asked after we got the Jeep back on the road. Everyone was interested, and the 2 kids began chatting excitedly about their adventures in a different country. "Rob, I wonder if everyone crossing over gets the same treatment we did," Caitlin asked with a curious look. "Do we need passports to cross? And what was that about anything to declare?" "Well, Caitlin, before September 11th, crossing over at Terlingua and Lajitas or anywhere else along the border was easy. People crossed daily to work, shop, eat, or visit family and friends. There's even a golf course where a couple of holes are in Mexico." After September 11th, the government became concerned about security and closed many crossings, which affected people on both sides, taking away jobs and connections. If they had allowed certain people who regularly crossed for valid reasons to continue, it might have been better for everyone. But when the women who cleaned hotel rooms in Lajitas and Terlingua could no longer cross to work, those rooms went uncleaned. It's not like there are many locals here looking for low-paying jobs, but those same jobs are vital for those across the river. There was quite a bit of breaking the rules, and law enforcement down here often turned a blind eye or joined in. If someone with bad intentions tries to come across, we'll handle it. I have many stories to share, but I'll say this. Aside from park rangers and border patrol, the closest police are about 90 miles away in Alpine, so we look out for each other. Diverting border patrol resources to enforce complicated rules against the connected people of La Frontera left hundreds of miles along the Texas-Mexico border underprotected. This created a chance for wrongdoers to move around unseen. Instead of making us safer, it made things worse. There's a part of the Second Amendment that talks about a well-regulated militia being important for the safety of a free state, which means people have the right to own weapons. Because of our special situation, we maintain such a militia, and as you noticed, we are well prepared. We must be, since criminal groups are armed and might try to take over this quiet area if they thought we were easy targets. Guillermo and the other Border Patrol officers who know this area understand our situation and stand by us. They tend to enforce federal rules in a selective way. They won't bother people they know, like us, when we cross to help the neighbors by spending money they need to live. If a dangerous group or unknown individuals try to cross into the U.S., the people in our community will alert the patrol. They will act, and we will support them fully. It has happened a few times, and so far we have been successful and unharmed. What do you mean it's happened a few times? Can you share an example? Caitlin, I can't say much, but I can tell you about a story that Texas Monthly covered. A bandit crossed the river and attacked a woman. He was later arrested in Mexico for a different crime, but his family had a lot of influence in the town, so he was going to get released easily. Some men dressed in black, wearing masks, showed up at the jail. They took him away while the jailer just smiled and didn't resist. A day later, the Brewster County Sheriff received a report that a wanted man was at a roadside park outside of town. They found him tied to a tree. He was without clothes and had several bruises on his body. Mexican authorities made a few empty threats about the vigilantes who crossed the line, and the sheriff promised a thorough investigation, but the vigilantes were never identified, and the attacker was convicted and punished. When he got out a few years later, he was sent back to Mexico. People say a group of men in black met him right after he crossed the border at Presidio and made it clear he should never return to Texas. "Were you one of those men in black?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Their identities are still a mystery, but keep in mind, I've only been here for 5 years. Much of that story happened before I got here." The kids had stopped chatting and started listening a while ago, so I aimed my answer at them. "Generally speaking, we don't think people should take the law into their own hands. However, good people can't just sit back and let bad people take over. So we do what we have to when the time comes. Most of the time, the authorities deal with things. But if they need help or can't do something important, the militia is ready. Now let's switch topics because we've arrived. We need to change into our swimwear. I'll park by the bushes. You ladies can change beside the Jeep on that side, and then the boys will..." Doss laughed. As soon as the girls got out, he quickly changed into his swim shorts. There was no one around, so I did the same behind the back doors. I grabbed a little cooler with drinks, joined them in front of the Jeep, and signaled the kids to lead us down the worn path by the Rio Grande. Caitlin followed the kids. She wore flip-flops and a soft cover-up that left her legs bare. I noticed her legs moving gracefully as she walked, and remembered when they had been close to me. She looked back and caught me watching, smiled, and made a show of climbing over a boulder that had fallen on the rocky path. From her climb, I noticed a few things. Her swimsuit was a little smaller than a regular two-piece. She was as strong and quick as ever, and she seemed ready to tease me whenever she could. We still hadn't had the important talks about what happened when she felt she had betrayed me and what had been going on with her since I left. Somehow we kept doing things together and talking about whatever the kids or Caitlin wanted to discuss. I really should gather everyone around a table to talk honestly. It's likely that what they tell me will be softer than what I've imagined all this time, so it might feel more freeing than upsetting. But not today. Today, we're here to have fun and explore. Maybe tomorrow. There were only 2 cars in the parking lot, a Nissan SUV and a Cadillac Escalade XL. A young couple was sitting by the springs closest to the old wall that kept the river away from the springs. They were sitting on a shelf in the base of the first bathhouse, so focused on each other that I doubted they noticed us. In the far corner, 6 men were loudly celebrating something. They had large cups filled with what I guessed was drinks, given how boastful they were and how loudly they laughed. My instinct told me to leave, as they seemed like trouble. However, they were too absorbed in their fun. So I led my small group to a spring near a rock ledge. It was my favorite spot, and also the farthest from the noisy crowd. I placed the drink cooler on the rock shelf and turned to check on my group again. They were still unaware of us until Caitlin removed her cover-up and tossed it by the cooler. The red bikini she wore was modest, but it looked great on her. As if it were normal, her kids ignored her and started jumping around, chatting about how warm the springs were and why they smelled a little strange. The 6 loud men, however, stopped their celebration and stared. I set my shirt down beside her cover-up and glanced at my daughter and her mother with a thoughtful expression. Grace certainly resembled her mom and grandma, and I knew she would be quite beautiful in a few years. That belief came from seeing Grandma Hopkins, who, at 52, maintained a figure very similar to her daughter's and showed hardly any signs of aging. No doubt Caitlin's features had softened as she aged, but in my view, those changes made her even more attractive. She and Grace leaned in to whisper, then placed their hands on their hips, sticking one hip out. "So, do we pass inspection?" Yeah, you 2 could stop traffic. Now, how about we sink into these springs here so those guys can go back to their fun?" That seemed like a good plan, but sadly it didn't go as hoped. I could blame their next actions on drinks and overconfidence, but it might have just been plain arrogance. "Hi, how are you all doing?" asked a tall man in his 30s standing just outside our spot. He was with another well-dressed guy, and both seemed very full of themselves. "We're doing well," I replied. Thankfully, Caitlin ignored them. staying submerged in the not very clear water and playing with the kids. Sounds like you guys are having a great time. Is there something special you're celebrating or just enjoying the day out? Oh, we're definitely celebrating. We just wrapped up a big deal that will make us even richer. Would you and your lovely lady like to join us? No thanks. We don't want to interrupt, and we're here with our kids, so we'll pass. But have fun. Turning to Caitlin as if I hadn't just answered, the arrogant guy asked, "How about you, lovely lady? Could we invite you to join us for some fun? Your friend might not be interested, but you seem like someone who enjoys a good time." Caitlin turned to him, gave a disapproving look, and stood up out of the water like a scene from a movie. I didn't hear any music, and the water didn't drip off her in slow motion, but it definitely got the attention of the group nearby until she spoke loudly. "I'm not sure why you think a mom playing with her kids, here with her husband, would want to party, but let me be clear. The answer is a definite no. Now please go back to your group, and we'd like to continue having fun." The crowd he came from laughed loudly, and the older man at the front guided them away from the embarrassed young men. "Sorry about that. DJ thinks he's really charming and thought you might be interested. We may have encouraged him a bit for some laughs. He owes me a bet because I could see how you look at your husband. I knew how this would go. Again, I'm sorry for interrupting your family time. We're leaving now and hope you enjoy your afternoon." As they left the water and headed down the path, Rob said to Caitlin, "You were tough. Rejection like that can really hit hard." "A nuclear bomb wouldn't even scratch the egos of that group," she replied with a laugh. "They probably think I wished I could be with all of them but was too shy to leave my kids and husband. They were celebrating their big success. You wouldn't turn down the chance to meet a young millionaire, would you?" I joked. She eyed me with a playful smile. "I'm aiming a bit higher. I have my eye on 100 millionaire, or that's what my old neighbor says when she visits this area." "Wow, those are high goals. Not many reach that level. I'm not there yet, but maybe someday with my current business deal. It doesn't help them, though. Their plans are poorly thought out and way too optimistic. But who am I to say anything?" We spent about an hour splashing in the water and sharing stories about the history of the place, including the old store and the rooms where visitors stayed. Then we got out, dried off, and walked along the trail, stopping to look at the ruins before heading back to the Jeep. We drove north for the long ride back to my house. I shared stories about the ghost towns nearby and the cinnabar mines that once attracted many people to this isolated and forgotten land, as one old writer called it before the days of roads and cars. You might not know about cinnabar, but it is a type of ore that can be turned into mercury, which has been used for a long time. In the past, mercury was used in tools for science to help find gold and silver, in making special chemicals, and in making felt. Sadly, many people who wore felt hats back then suffered from health issues because mercury is harmful. Now it is mostly used in making industrial chemicals and in electronics, which is why I advised against taking apart electronic devices just to see what is inside, I said. There are also uranium mines, but those are newer and not part of the older stories. Changing my tone, I began to tell a tale. The faraway place and rugged land in this part of the Chihuahuan Desert are filled with mystery and challenge. Early pioneers often faced great dangers in these dry and difficult mountains. Some died or vanished. Others were harmed by local tribes, such as the Apache or Comanche. Some faced Mexican raiders or dangerous outlaws hiding in the canyons. A few were bitten by venomous snakes or came across wild animals, and many simply got lost in the vast desert. I noticed attentive faces in the back seat and the passenger seat as I continued the story of the lost Bill Kelly mine. Everyone enjoys stories of hidden treasure, right? Well, somewhere in this remote land, the Bill Kelly mine was said to be one of the richest in all of North America, but it was also said to be cursed, because those who claimed to have found the gold or thought they were close to locating it did not end well. Near what we now call Rio Grande Village, Kelly met a family of ranchers named Reagan, who laughed at his claims of finding a gold mine even when he showed them a piece of rock with gold flakes in it. The ranchers knew little about gold and doubted that this half-Seminole, half-African-American man, dressed in rags, knew much either. After he sent the quartz by train to be tested in San Antonio, they received a letter saying it was worth $80,000 per ton, which was a huge amount of money back then. Worried about his bosses being interested in his mine, Kelly left for Mexico. Even after Kelly passed away, stories about a black man with bags of gold continued. The Reagans and others kept looking for the mine and hiring others to help until the Mexican Revolution in 1910 made it too risky to continue. Some people said the mine was in the Ladrones Mountains of Mexico, while others thought it was in the Quizos Mountains of Texas. Who knows? Maybe we will find it one day. After we talked about that, Grace pointed out the piles of rocks and dirt, noticing the many colors in the eroded areas. I told them that the Jumano Indians of this area believed this was where the Great Spirit left behind rocks when creating the earth. Others called it God's junkyard. Dos argued that it was beautiful here, with the mountains, deep creeks, many colors, and different plants and animals. Caitlin had heard of the Solitario and asked if it related to my Jumano name. I explained that the Solitario is in what is now the Big Bend Ranch State Park. From the sky, it looks like a large crater caused by a meteor, but it is really the eroded remains of a volcanic dome. Now that you know all that, you might guess that Solitario also means lonely. I live far from anyone and travel a lot, so my neighbors here think I'm alone, but you all know I have Duke, so I'm not really alone, right? Dos quickly agreed, but Grace frowned and Caitlin looked unsure. Well, maybe I do miss you two sometimes, I said, smiling at them through the rearview mirror. What about Mommy? Dos asked innocently. His question surprised me, and I needed a moment to gather my thoughts, which made Caitlin start to speak for me. I jumped in. Son, I can honestly say that every day since we parted in Houston nearly 5 years ago, I've thought about my family, you, your sister, and your mommy. Caitlin held back a sudden sob and turned to look out the window. Grace spoke up. We missed you too, Daddy. Let's not ever be apart again, Dawes said firmly. We miss you too much, Daddy. Look at all the fun we have when we're together. Caitlin was hugging herself, looking a bit shaky. I wanted to comfort her, but she needed to deal with her feelings. Duke was happy to see us, but we were hungry, so we changed and took him with us back to La Kiva. He was our guide for this trip and needed to greet everyone before coming back to stand next to Doss and Grace, his tail wagging happily. The group was chatting as usual, but since it was after 7 and very busy, there were no tables or chairs for us to join them. Daddy, there's nowhere to sit, Grace pointed out. There's a place. Follow me. I walked to a sliding door on the wall and opened a small room with 5 tables. Renee had 3 waitresses and a waiter working tonight, so using this area shouldn't be a problem. But I wanted to check with him after seating my family. When I finally spoke to him, Renee said it was fine and offered that I could help with serving if things got too hectic. I grabbed a couple of menus and an order pad and took care of my family and another table in the second room occupied by a couple I knew. Danny is a skilled welder, and Deborah is a great nurse. They have 2 kids the same age as mine, so after I took their order, I asked if I could introduce the kids after we ate. They thought it was a wonderful idea and said they would bring their kids over. Berta always has extra help in the kitchen on Fridays, but the food was just as good as ever. I even tried the char-grilled quail special, stepping out of my comfort zone. The kids shared a plate of fajitas, and Caitlin tried the small filet mignon. We all agreed that the food was fantastic. After their meal, Danny and Deborah brought their kids over, and they quickly ran off to explore the big room, giving us time to chat. A few moments later, Deborah and Caitlin realized they knew some of the same people from around Katy, making them fast friends for the evening. Danny and I talked about the Sul Ross Lobos football team's chances for next year when El Coyote came to the door of the side room and invited us to join them as the crowd had lessened. Danny and Deborah were excited, having never been invited to the main group before, but our friends welcomed them warmly, and everything went smoothly. Caitlin, however, received some playful teasing. Willie was there smiling, and Coyote began to tell a funny story. We heard you arrived without proper papers, caused quite a stir with that dress you wore, and nearly took a lot of things from Mexico. Poor Captain Pablo told Willie that you almost filled his boat with all your fines, and your friend ended up paying a large bribe to keep you from getting in trouble. Caitlin, who usually handled these situations well, was caught off guard for a moment. Actually, the way she got out of the boat and the friendly kiss she gave the officer had more to do with her staying out of trouble than the bribe. Pablo almost capsized the boat because he was too busy watching her long, beautiful legs instead of steering on the river. I glanced down at the golden legs hanging out of her navy outfit. Plus, Willie probably got a good look down her off-shoulder dress, which is similar to what she's wearing tonight. You see my point? My offer of a free beer doesn't compare to Caitlin's charm. Caitlin's face turned bright red, and the smiles that had been forming during my talk turned into loud laughs. She quickly regained her confidence and playfully stood up, turning as if she were dancing, and said, "Oh, come on. There's nothing about me that would interest a younger guy like Willie. He probably sees better every day." "Sweetheart, you are exactly why the term MILF was created. Your picture might as well be next to the definition," Toro said, earning nods from our table and even some nearby women. "If your man doesn't start treating you right, just come back here and you'll have plenty of options." While the jokes were flying and Caitlin's confidence was building, Chaparral stepped outside to take a phone call. He returned with a worried look and pointed to me, saying, "Rob, we need to talk. Let's go outside." The table fell silent. "Oh no," Toro said under his breath, and every man pushed their beer towards the center. Caitlin, looking confused, asked, "What's wrong?" With his eyes on the people outside, Toro replied, "Not sure, but Chap called your man Rob. He doesn't use our names unless trouble is around." After hearing the news and feeling frustrated, I took out my phone and made a call I hoped I wouldn't have to. "Remember the favor you owe me?" "We're already on it. I got the word about an hour ago." "Where do you want to meet?" Claude replied. "I don't know yet, but I need to get my family to safety. I might need help moving them." "Not unless you want them in danger. The original plan was for them. You were added later. We can't protect both you and them if they're separated, so they need to stay with you." "Great. I'll need to know more later, but for now, what do you suggest?" "The mountain lair. It's easier to prepare for any issues from the surrounding mountains, and it's nearly impossible for intruders to access except through the road. More importantly, you have a safe place for your family if things get intense." "What do you mean, intense? Who are these people?" "We're not sure, but we think they are a group of hired soldiers instead of cartel members. It's unclear what weapons they have." "Great, this is just fantastic. Do we have time to get to safety?" "From what we heard, it's hard to tell. We think there are two groups, a smaller one that might be scouting and a larger one that's following. They seem to be heading to Study Butte first, so tell everyone to head home and spread the word. If the local militia takes out a few, that would be good, but we don't want anyone to get hurt. Encourage everyone to look out for themselves and each other, but to avoid unnecessary fights." "Okay, Claude, we'll move in an hour. I'll contact the sheriff." "Don't worry about that. I've already spoken to the Brotherhood. The sheriff reached out and mentioned he has some new gear he got through grants that he wants to test. Anyway, grab your lovely wife, your kids, and Duke and head to the fortress. We'll meet you there. You know she's not my wife, let me guess. She's the reason all this trouble is happening, right?" "Yes, she is. But let's be honest, she is your wife in her heart. You never stopped caring for her. She learned the hard way that you are the one she truly cares for, and now she's looking for you. So it's time to stop being upset and take care of your family. We expect you in 3 or 4 hours, but keep me posted and send me a message when you pass Alpine so I can warn the team." Everyone in La Kiva turned to me when I walked back in. The folks and the kids were gathered around the table. "We're on high alert. We don't know how many are out there, but they are well armed and dangerous. Chap, do you have more information?" "The Escamilla cartel hired them, and it looks like Ronaldo is with them. If that's true, they are very sure of themselves. The contract is for 4 people. That's all I know, but I can confirm they are dangerous. I think we should leave if we can, but if we stay, let's stick together for safety." "Saguaro, what's your opinion?" "Plan A. Get out if you can. If you must stay, find safe spots as far away from Rob's place as possible. This isn't an attack, it's more like a targeted hit. Even though Rob won't be there, you're heading to the mountains, right?" I nodded. "Good. They'll likely check his house first and might get hurt there. Then they might head to Fort Davis. I'm sure those were Rob's friends he was talking to, so we should be ready when we get there. Everyone else needs to stay safe." "We? Saguaro, you don't have to get involved. Your friend is my half-brother, and we owe you. So yes, I will be there. I'll drive you in my Hummer, just in case." "My real name is Carl Thompson. I recently retired from the military, and I now help my brother. We can talk more about my mission when we reach the mountains, Rob. Anyway, we need to have a quick meeting, then get to our plan. Berta, you and Rosa should start moving from here and head out. Let me know when you arrive at Presidio, but please keep your location to yourself. Any questions? No? Then let's get moving. And please be careful. He hugged Rosa and gave her a kiss before she and Berta went into the office. Sol, I'll see you at the general store in an hour. The group began to split up, but I stopped them. They are in two groups, and the smaller one might be close by. They are looking for Caitlin, the kids, and me, so if you stay away from us and my place, you should be fine. If you see them, just act like you don't know where we went after dinner. Go with God, friends, Chaparral prayed, then told me quietly, No need to ask, it has started. Caitlin held on to our two curious kids and asked, Is the contract for 4? Is it Robert? Why? Yes, and I don't know. Let's move. Duke sensed the situation well and led us to the Jeep. We drove through the desert toward the house, staying alert. We saw nothing and he didn't sense any danger, so I turned off the sensors as we approached and turned them back on once we parked behind the house. I parked the Jeep in the garage, quickly opened the other door, and brought out the large drone I had stored there. Caitlin and the kids headed to the house to gather their things, but paused when they saw me. Once the drone was in the middle of the parking area, I called everyone inside. They dashed around collecting their items while I activated the drone and flew it out over the desert and back along the road. The drone hadn't traveled far when the thermal cameras found 6 small vehicles moving quickly through the desert half a mile west of the road. I flew up high to stay hidden and used the low-light cameras to see they were riding ATVs on the flatland. Doss, Grace, and Caitlin stood behind me, watching the control screen. Does anyone know how to fly a drone? I asked. To my surprise, both Grace and Doss did know how, and so did Caitlin. Don't be surprised. Both kids had small drones, and I learned to pilot them. I enjoyed it so much that I got one for myself, and the kids will tell you I'm pretty good at it. Yours works like ours, but it's bigger and has different cameras. I handed the controls to Caitlin and told her to keep the drone flying smoothly above the red figures and to alert me if anyone strays from the group. Doss and Grace stood behind her, watching the screen. I opened the weapons room, grabbed the laptop, and set up the security measures along the southwestern property line. I got my sniper rifle and a BCM Recce 16 AR in case anyone came too close. Duke, come with me, I called as I headed for the sliding door. Dad, they turned and are coming toward us, Doss shouted. I looked over their shoulders and saw them approaching from the southwest, just as I thought they would. A steep granite ridge over 200 feet high and a quarter-mile wide runs from the base of my place to the west. A larger group might try that route, but not 6 people on ATVs. To the east, there are deep canyons, so the road from the south or the desert to the southwest are really their only choices. All right, send the drone back down the road to check if anyone else is coming. Keep it flying above and slightly behind them. I'll be on the patio by the west wall with my sniper rifle. You'll see some flashes, which will show up as red bursts. After that, a series of bright lights will turn on. Let me know if anyone gets past the flashes and where they are. The kids were calm and focused. I couldn't tell if Caitlin was okay or just really still as she held the controller. Are you all right? I asked. She nodded, told me to keep everyone safe, and asked where I wanted her. Stay inside with Doss and Grace. If something happens, lock yourselves in the weapons room and use the laptop to contact Saguaro through the app that looks like a mountain. He will come help you. Be careful, she said firmly. I nodded, opened the sliding door, and stepped outside with Duke. I closed the door behind us and moved quickly to the southwestern corner of the patio near the grills. Duke, sit and be ready. He sat beside me, alert and ready to go. I would be using the Tracking Point precision weapons sniper rifle I bought after attending a shooting event in 2015. Tara Kyle, the widow of American sniper Chris Kyle, used this rifle to win against the reigning champion, who used various military sniper rifles. Miss Kyle used different Tracking Point models and won by a large margin. She made all her shots from positions like lying down, kneeling, and sitting, hitting every target 100%. How did the champion do? He hit 58, 4% of the same targets. In even tougher challenges where they had to aim at targets without being able to see them directly, Kyle managed to hit every shot while her opponent did not hit a single one. That competition sold me on the rifle, and I bought one as soon as I could. I'm not trying to brag, but the rifle I have can hit a target from very far away. I could hear the distant sounds of ATV engines. My rifle was set up for shooting, but I wasn't looking through the scope yet. Caitlin spoke softly from behind me. We came out here to tell you what we see. Good point. We should communicate more openly since we don't have any devices. Please sit on the west side of the picnic table so you're safe from any danger, but I can still hear you. I wasn't thrilled they were outside, but they were right about needing to talk, and they were safe as long as they stayed back and out of sight. I was more worried about how they would react to the loud noises that were coming. Rob, they've slowed down and are moving toward the creek bed and road in a wide V shape. Suddenly, there were loud booms in the air. 3 quick explosions lit up the night sky. I imagined anyone without proper gear would be caught off guard. The riders must have had the right gear to be racing through the desert, so they likely stopped to adjust their eyes after the blasts. I waited and looked for any movement. After a few moments, I took a breath and looked through the scope. I could see 5 bright lights revealing 3 flipped-over ATVs and 3 others with drivers still sitting on them. I aimed at the furthest vehicle and squeezed the trigger gently to let the rifle adjust itself. A green light appeared, and I put a little more pressure before it fired. The man fell off the ATV. I quickly aimed at another distant target. He removed his goggles, revved his ATV, and started moving forward. The rifle fired again, and he flew off the back of the ATV, which then came to a stop. The closest target dropped to the ground, scrambling towards a small dip in the terrain. He reached it and froze for a moment before raising his weapon to fire wildly at the house below. Sparks flew where the bullets hit the rocks. I waited for him to pop up and take aim. Caitlin, Grace, and Doss were behind me at the picnic table, safely shielded by the walls around the patio. Suddenly a shot whizzed past me and hit high on the south wall of the house, harmlessly burying into the adobe. Dad, that shot came from someone crawling up the rocks near the creek. He's getting close to the road, Grace said. I didn't worry about that shooter because he wouldn't be able to hit us from that angle with the wall in the way. I knew he would have to cross an open space once he cleared the rocks. I had a good chance then. The other person peeked over the bank and shot at the house. He was hit and fell back into the ditch below. I aimed the rifle at the climber. He seemed unsure about crossing the open space. He placed his hand on the rock for a moment. Then, deciding to go for it, he reached out and tried to pull himself up. But before he could make it, a bullet struck him in the chest and he fell back onto the rocks. Do we see any moving heat signatures? I asked. No, Rob, Caitlin replied. Some are gone and others are fading, but nothing is moving. Okay, give me the controls. I'll bring the drone back and store it. She handed me the controls and asked what we should do next. Great job, everyone. I think the immediate danger is over, but let's stay cautious. Crouch down and head back inside the house. Gather your things while I put the drone away. I'll grab my bag and then we can get in the Jeep to meet Saguaro at Study Butte. We have a long drive ahead to the mountain lair. Saguaro was waiting in a secure vehicle. He said he would help as needed, but the main group had taken a different route, so he felt we would have a smooth drive through Alpine to Fort Davis and beyond. I asked if he had told the others, and he said that Chap's sources had confirmed the details, so they were ready. The kids were too excited to sleep for the first 40 miles, and they asked lots of questions I couldn't answer. Eventually, they tired out, giving Caitlin and me some time to talk as we drove to Alpine. With the kids asleep, it was Caitlin's turn to ask many questions, and I didn't have the answers. The truth is, Caitlin, I only know that there was a contract out on you and our kids, and then I was included. We don't know who is after us or why, but it seems the Escamilla cartel is involved. Do you have any idea why? No, but I heard Chap mention Ronaldo. When things started to go wrong for their business, I heard Robert warn his lawyer that losing Ronaldo's money would lead to big trouble, and they both sounded scared. The authorities suspect Ronaldo was involved in a money laundering scheme with them. If he took or lost their money, they'll want it back, or else he'd be in serious danger. They sometimes threaten the families of those who betray them too, but I can't see why I would have been included. I didn't know anything about the money issues or any accounts he might have with them. I reported him for stealing a lot of money and for trying to push me into making deals with people and groups that the U.S. considers dangerous. Anyway, I hope we learn more when we get there, but I don't think Ronaldo is behind the trouble with Robert's family, since he hasn't harmed Robert yet. My phone buzzed. Chap said, "That was fast. I assume your family is okay and the others are not?" I confirmed that we were all right, and they were not. He asked, "You activated everything when you left, right?" I reassured him I had. "So, Coyote says you have a lot of propane tanks and twice as many devices set up along the road and around the hill. We will launch our drone when we hear the next group is on your road. Do you want us to send you the video feed or handle it from here? Are you in a secure spot, Carlos?" "We're where we agreed, with good protection on both sides, and we have our dirt bikes, so we're fine. Are you giving us the go-ahead?" "I am, but only if you are completely safe. I can rebuild a house, but you guys are hard to replace." "Okay, but one more thing. Guillermo has the authorities on alert with helicopters too. When your show is over, we're leaving and the legal officials will take over. In the meantime, put your kids and the lovely lady in the safe spot and keep them there. You should go too. Let the experts handle this." "You know me, of course I will." "Sure. Take care, my friend. Same to you, my friends. See you later." We followed SH-17 through Alpine to a road just south of Fort Davis, then turned north on SH-166. State Highway 166 winds through the empty desert between Fort Davis and Valentine. Valentine is mostly a ghost town with about 200 residents and a well-known post office. You can send your Valentine cards there, and they will be stamped Valentine, Texas, and sent to your loved one. This is a large, empty area with little traffic. Fort Davis, both the town and the fort, attract many tourists and history lovers, as does Marfa, but 166 offers less scenery compared to 17, which leads to the world's largest spring-fed swimming pool, or 118, which goes past McDonald Observatory through beautiful forested areas and on to Van Horn. Few people live here because much of the land is owned by people who rarely come to visit, and even more land is hard to reach by car. Silverleaf Ranch is a good example. When El Gato told me he had the perfect place for me, I took a helicopter ride to see if I could find a suitable spot for a home among the hills and valleys. On the vast 3,200 acres of mountains, I found only 3 possible locations to build. 2 of them were too close to the road for my liking. The site I picked could only be reached by helicopter, on foot, or by horseback. From the helicopter, I noticed that a road could be made along a sloping area to the tallest mountain, as long as we could cross the last canyon. Luckily, this canyon was deep but narrow, formed by a stream instead of weathering from the mountains. A civil engineer, Gatto's favorite from his time in Dallas, joined us on horseback to check the canyon. After looking it over, he said we could build a solid road and that we could span the canyon with a strong arch bridge for heavy vehicles. The next day, the 3 of us landed the helicopter on my chosen site to see if I could build a home there as I imagined. He agreed it was possible, but a lot of rock would need to be removed. He seemed excited about the challenges ahead and perhaps a bit lightheaded from the altitude and drinks we had. He eagerly asked to take on the engineering work, and we made a deal. Then the real work began. We needed to build a road strong enough to bring in heavy equipment and concrete trucks from the desert floor, up a long, sloped path to the mesa and to the final canyon. Constructing the arch bridge to support the heavy trucks across the 250-foot gap turned out to be more challenging than Terry anticipated. But with help from a helicopter and a sturdy footbridge, we managed to complete it. Before building the bridge, we drilled and cleared the area for the house's foundation. Once the bridge was finished, we completed the road, leveled the building site, and then started digging for the basement and the house above. Fortunately, my investments and business were growing faster than expected, as the construction used a lot of concrete and steel, especially for the basement. These materials were costly, and we needed skilled workers who were also trustworthy. The Brotherhood assisted us here too. While there weren't many people around to notice our activities in the mountains, the sheriff insisted that we have a talk early on. It was a pleasant talk. Although he had heard about me, he wanted to meet me in person to see if he felt different. We got along well. I learned that I was not the only one preparing for tough times in the area. Being part of the Brotherhood gave me good standing with Sheriff Goodson, his team, and local law enforcement nearby, Balmorhea, Fort Davis, Marfa, and Alpine. On my gate, there is a metal sign with the crossed lightning bolts symbol of the Brotherhood. Many people do not know what it means, but those who need to know understand. The entrance to Silverleaf Oak Ranch is a few miles past Mount Livermore, one of the tallest mountains in Texas, standing at 8,378 feet. It is impressive because it rises 3,918 feet above the desert below, surrounded by foothills and smaller mountains covered in Mexican piñon pines. This mountain looks even more striking as you drive around it. We turned off the highway, unlocked the steel gate, and continued up the road. The road climbed about 900 feet up to a flat area between two deep canyons. A mile into the ranch, the road crossed a bridge onto the mountain where the mountain lair is built. The road was not very dangerous, unlike the one at the desert lair, but the canyons on either side were steep and looked more scary in the dark. As we got closer to the house, both kids woke up. Grace asked, "Where are we?" "This is my other house, the mountain lair. Tomorrow I'll show you around, but for tonight, let's get some sleep, okay?" Caitlin had made sure they wore pajamas for the trip, so they followed me to their bedrooms for the night. We tucked them in and walked back toward the living area. "This is your other house? I hope this is your main house. If you have a nicer place than this, I'll start to think you're involved in something shady." "No, this is home, in a way. I split my time here and at the desert lair. Just so you know, I built this to be very strong against most dangers. That's why the walls are thick, made of reinforced concrete covered with stucco. There is also a safe room that can handle serious threats, and that's where you and the kids will be if we ever need to hide. I can show it to you now, just in case, but we think there is little chance of danger tonight." I led her through the kitchen and into the pantry. I opened a container on a high shelf labeled flour, flipped a switch inside, and the back shelf slid aside to reveal a hidden space. We walked down a slope into a big basement that looked like a game room. There were tables for pool, shuffleboard, and ping pong, along with 2 pinball machines. Couches with coffee tables were spread along the walls. The door to the bunker is hidden here in the basement, disguised as a heating unit. Behind it is a vault door with a combination lock. It opens with a code that changes every day. You have to use this code to open the door from both sides. The bunker can also be accessed from another place, but that keypad is well hidden, and the code is very hard to figure out, even with the right tools. The command center we will use during an emergency is inside the bunker, and the communication ports there are the only way to send or receive information while in a crisis. There is enough food and water for 22 people to last a month, and it has its own power and air systems. The generators and air ducts are well concealed in other areas, so it's unlikely anyone can tamper with them. You'll see all that tomorrow, but I wanted to give you a preview before we try to rest. "Show me inside. I want to see where I might stay for a month with 2 energetic kids." I opened the panel with the hidden tool on top of the heating unit. The vault was open, as it always was when not in use. I stepped inside and waited for her. "This is not what I expected. We have a living room with couches and chairs, 2 big TVs with DVD players, at least a dozen laptops with game controllers, and a library. There is a full kitchen with a walk-in freezer. I assume those are storage areas." I nodded, and she continued to look around. "What's behind the twin steel doors with the biometric locks?" she asked. "The one on the right is the storage area. The left is the other command center." "I see. I also noticed 2 large bathrooms with several showers and toilets. One bedroom that can be an office with a nice bathroom, a smaller bedroom with 2 full beds and a bathroom, and a large room with 12 bunk beds. Your bunker can sleep 22, right?" "That doesn't count the couches. It can be 26 if you do, and up to 36 if we set up air mattresses, but I wouldn't want that many for a month, not enough food." She said she really needed to use the restroom, so I should close the vault door, and then I could show her how to open it. She went into the bathroom in the bedroom and stayed there for several minutes before I heard the flush. Right after that, I could hear the shower running. I pressed the button to close the door and walked back toward the bedroom to meet her. The light went off, so I paused and waited. A lamp switched on in the bedroom, and I heard her call, "Rob?" "Yes, Caitlin? Come in here, please." Curious about what she wanted, I walked into the bedroom and stopped, taken by surprise. She stood there with a look of calm determination. She didn't say much, just gazed at me with a quiet intensity that made the moment feel heavy. It was clear she had something important to share, but the words seemed to escape her. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Then, with a deep breath, I stepped further into the room and met her gaze, knowing this was a turning point for both of us. She finally broke the silence, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "If tomorrow is uncertain, I just want to feel connected to you tonight. Can we just be together for now?" I nodded, understanding the need for closeness during such an uncertain time. Without rushing, I joined her, and we held each other, letting the comfort of being together fill the quiet space between us. We spent the night in each other's arms, not needing words. It was a moment of peace in the middle of everything, a brief escape from the uncertainty of what tomorrow might bring. There was no need to rush or push for more. We were simply there, together, and that was enough. Caitlin looked at me with desperation in her eyes, her voice trembling. "I need to be close to you like only you can make me feel." I hesitated, my thoughts clouded with old feelings of betrayal. Why should I? The moment I'm not here, you'll just find someone else. "No," she cried, shaking her head. "I love you. I've always loved only you. I lost my way, but I've come back. Please, just be with me tonight." Though a part of me still felt hurt, I couldn't deny the connection we once had. Slowly, we came together, finding comfort in each other's presence. The tension between us began to dissolve as we moved in sync, feeling a sense of relief and release. We shared the moment in silence, letting the past slip away, even if just for the night. The uncertainty of tomorrow weighed on us both, but in that instant, none of it mattered. Caitlin shifted closer, taking charge in a way that showed she wanted to reconnect, both physically and emotionally. She looked down at me, her gaze soft but determined. She needed this closeness, this moment of reassurance, and so did I. I held her, and for a while everything else faded. The worries, the regrets, the mistakes, all of it seemed distant. For now, we were simply two people finding comfort in each other's arms. As we lay together afterward, she whispered softly, "We were always meant to be, weren't we?" Her words were more a quiet statement than a question, as if she was trying to convince herself as much as me. We both knew that tomorrow might bring challenges, but for now, the closeness we shared was enough to ease the weight of those thoughts. In that moment, we were together, and that was all that mattered. Caitlin let out a cry as she tensed up for a moment, but then relaxed again, collapsing against me, completely exhausted. I gently pulled away, allowing her to rest while I took a moment to clean up. Her breathing was steady as she lay there, lost in the moment. After a few minutes, I returned to her, seeing that she was calm and at peace. I made sure she was comfortable, gently adjusting the pillows and blankets around her. She made a small, sleepy noise but remained still. I leaned in close and whispered softly, "Let's just rest now. It's been a long night." We stayed there together, the room quiet, both of us taking in the stillness. There was no need for words, no need for anything more. We were simply two people who had found a moment of peace after everything that had happened. With the past behind us and the future uncertain, we let the night carry us, knowing that for now, we were together. And that was all that mattered. Every part of her was in sync with me now, moving with purpose and energy. I knew I wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. "Focus on yourself," I urged her quietly, and she did so without hesitation. I lowered myself closer, reaching around her, feeling the intensity of the moment building within both of us. The pressure mounted quickly, and I knew this would be a powerful release. When it finally hit, it was overwhelming. I remember a loud cry escaping from me, followed by a rush of euphoria that seemed to take over everything. It was an intense, almost overwhelming sensation, but then everything went still and peaceful. As we lay there catching our breath, a voice suddenly interrupted the quiet. "Thanks for leaving the comms on, Rob. That was something else. I won't even charge you for this mission if you and the Star agree to sign a waiver for the footage." "Not funny, Claude," I muttered, still disoriented. Claude laughed heartily. "I doubt you can manage anything right now. For a second I thought she might have finished you off, but seriously, are you awake enough to sign that waiver?" "Cut it out," I snapped, more awake now as I quickly pulled the sheet over us. Claude's teasing continued. Okay, enough jokes. This is Carl, by the way. We're about to get things rolling at the other site, and we could use your help. Wrap things up and get moving. Oh, and Rob? No one's going to be looking at you anyway. Caitlin, her face flushed, peeked out from under the covers. Please tell me you weren't watching, Carl chuckled. Of course not. No one would ever want to see that, right? But regardless, Rob needs to get up here. We're expecting contact soon, and we need him ready in about 15 minutes. I shot them a frustrated gesture as I got up and hurriedly dressed. Caitlin, still a bit embarrassed, whispered, I'd come with you, but I think I'll stay under the sheets for now. I nodded and prepared to head out, knowing the next challenge was just ahead. What should I do? Like you have anything they haven't already seen, Princess, if they were really watching. She glared around the room, tossed the sheets aside, made a gesture, and walked confidently into the bathroom. I put on my boots and headed toward the vault door. She came out in a simple outfit wearing sandals with her hair tied back. Wait for me, you need to show me how to open it. She entered the code for the day, and the vault door swung open. We rushed upstairs and through the house to the control room. The battle, as it was, lasted a little more than 8 minutes. The night vision drone showed 3 black vans speeding down the road to the desert lair. They stopped before the curve that led to the creek, and 6 men got out of each van. They set up in a line, rushing toward the creek and the path that ran up the mountain. Chap was in charge of the drone, Coyote managed the firing controls, and Toro handled the explosives that weren't linked to the laser system. Using the drone and the laser security system, they figured out when the enemy crossed the beams, activating the explosives and the hidden machine guns. When Coyote and Toro gave the signals, the explosives closest to the troops went off, and the machine guns fired in quick bursts. The quiet desert night erupted in sound and light when the first explosion went off, followed by the second. The hidden lights turned on, we could hear shouts and saw troops falling to the ground. Another drone flew by and Chap sent his after it, leaving us unaware of what was happening. A short time later, our drone came back, showing the soldiers retreating around the bend, then running to their vans, which quickly drove away. Well, that was quick, Chap said. Looked like a couple were hurt, but if we had waited, the larger explosives would have caused much more damage. Why did they leave? I asked. I'm guessing, but I think their drone spotted that no one was home before we struck. They might settle somewhere for the night, but everyone's got to be ready. They are clearly looking for you, so even though it's almost dawn, they might try again. We will stay alert, but I think tonight is our best chance, Claude replied. Are we all set in Mexico? Everything is falling into place. The last message came in around 1 a.m. Tino confirmed they are ready. Phones are blocked, labeled as a service outage, and Mundo has the mother, wife, and kids ready to leave on his private plane at 9. He collected their phones and won't give them back until we say so. Is everything arranged on your end? We have our team ready, and the sheriff is briefed and prepared, he says. He wants to rush in like a hero with his new gear and big gun. We'll see what happens, but if we have to use the big weapon, there won't be much left. Every group has a downer, and this time it's Guillermo. I'll let him explain. Hey, Willie, what's wrong? I asked, giving him a chance to speak. Guess you noticed the helicopter didn't show up. The boss in charge earlier said it was grounded and wouldn't be joining us. He wouldn't share why, but he said it wasn't his call. That means it came from someone higher up, which means someone above him is working with Escamilla. That could be an issue, Carl said. We shouldn't rely on the sheriff either. We have no idea where that order came from. It could be from any of the agencies. But if it's the sheriff in Texas, he has some power. He can stand up to them if he wants to. That's just one more thing to think about, I replied. But I don't think we need the sheriff on this, though it would be better if he was on our side so he shares some of the blame. If they come at us like last night, it could be an easy win for us. Almost makes me feel embarrassed to ask, but are we ready in case they arrive early? Carl and Claude laughed, so I took the quieter one and asked her to come with me. Are you two going to rest, or keep making your little films? We'd be happy to offer an exciting contract to Foxy Roxy. You ready to sign? She turned around, hands on her hips, and said, I know you're lying, so just leave us alone. With a playful tone, Carl said, All right. You two go have fun. We'll keep an eye out. When she spun around again, he raised his hands, watching for trouble. Feeling better, she walked away. Carl followed us to the door and said, "That is such a cute little mark on you. Maybe you should be the star all the time," and closed the door. Caitlin turned pale and then blushed deeply. "Why didn't you tell me everything was being recorded?" she asked, sounding upset. "I had no clue. I knew they were putting in cameras, but I promise I didn't know it was on. You know, I'm not too excited about becoming famous as the sidekick to Foxy Roxy, who has her own website." I sounded serious about not knowing, but my playful tone at the end made her smile. Trying to keep from laughing, she gave me a pouty look. "Actually, I'm pretty sure there are only a few copies. One for each brother and one for me. I doubt it will ever go online, but their friends might see it after a few drinks." I knew mine would too. I jumped back as her hand swung close to my face, and then she laughed. Since I hadn't asked her not to, Maria came in to tidy up and prepare some food. The visitors accepted her presence without question until she parked and entered the building. Once inside, Claude welcomed her, let her know he was one of several guests, and mentioned they would be in the office upstairs, which didn't need cleaning. Just then, Grace and Doss came running down asking where their mom was. Claude explained that she was up late and sleeping, so they should let her rest a bit longer. Maria offered to make them breakfast and ended up cooking enough tacos for all 18 guests. Caitlin woke me up with some cozy affection, but in the midst of all the movement, she lost her blanket. By the time we were done, she had been without it for a while. I think the chance of being seen made her more excited, but she insisted she simply got a bit carried away and felt shy afterward. I laughed and reminded her about being uncovered, and she playfully nudged me before rushing off to the shower. The kids wanted to visit the McDonald Observatory, but I distracted them with promises of ATV and horse rides on the ranch. By that time, Toro, Chap, Gatto, and Coyote had arrived and offered to show Caitlin and the kids around the mountain while I worked with my brothers. Before I left, Gatto motioned for me to come over. We let the kids go out the door, and he informed me that 3 young men from the Middle East had been found. They were dressed in military-style clothes and were carrying firearms. The 6 I dealt with were from various backgrounds: 2 Eastern Europeans, 2 Afghans, 1 African, and 1 Syrian. Through some papers discovered at the scene and face identification, they learned that 3 of them had arrived in Houston from a container ship. 2 others had flown in from France. It was unclear how the other 4 got here, but they held Canadian passports and all had U.S. visas. Neither of my brothers seemed shocked by the news. Claude noted, "When the rumors started, we heard Escamilla was using a group to move drugs from Afghanistan. We also learned he wanted to control the drug trade in the U.S. and Canada by managing supplies from Mexico and Afghanistan. Surely he wouldn't be foolish enough to rely on untrained people to try to hurt you." "Or maybe he would," Clay speculated. "Their plan in the desert seemed poorly thought out. Let's hope they stick to those strategies here." We checked our communication system, making sure the jamming devices, anti-jamming devices, and hacking devices were all working properly. My mountain lair relied mainly on electronic systems, with large batteries and backup generators. I felt uneasy because I couldn't see any weaknesses. There is always a weakness somewhere. I hoped our enemy wouldn't discover it, but I knew I should find someone to test it thoroughly when this is over. Ronaldo isn't the only one who might want to harm me. That's just part of the job. Robert Sr. faced the same challenge. When Caitlin and the kids came back from exploring the mountain, they had received their Humano names. Grace was called La Mariquita, and Dos was El Cabello, which they were excited to explain meant ladybug and stallion. "Great names. What is Mommy's Humano name?" I asked. They shrugged and dashed off to share their new names with Maria. "Ah," said El Chaparral. "I named her La Chica Bonita that first night, but some prefer La Rubia Hermosa." I looked at Caitlin and asked, "Are either of those okay?" She looked curious and replied, "What do they mean?" "They are different ways to say something a bit harsh." I answered with a serious face. Chap and the others quickly corrected me, saying that La Chica Bonita means pretty girl or young woman, and La Rubia Hermosa means beautiful blonde woman. She tried to playfully hit me, but I was too fast. Then she joked to the others, "Since he's no longer a lone man, how about we give him a name that fits?" "Oh, we already have another name for him, El Cabron. It literally means male goat, but it's a playful way to mean troublemaker. You can use that when he acts up, like now." We laughed as we walked back to the kitchen where Maria and her daughter had prepared a delightful Mexican feast. There were large dishes full of enchiladas, a pot of beef stew, a dish of beans, and everything needed for tasty beef tacos. We shared the meal with Carl and Claude, then made sure that everyone at the ready stations had a good meal. Prepackaged food can get dull. I really enjoyed sitting at the northern point, holding the stinger and looking at the sky. It was a clear and pleasantly cool day with lots of animals making noise around us. When I returned, Caitlin and the kids had cleaned everything up, so I told Maria and her daughter they could go home early and take tomorrow off, with pay. They thanked me and were safely escorted to their home in Fort Davis by a couple of bodyguards. While it was unlikely they would be at risk, anyone leaving could be. We settled on the wide terrace beside the pool and hot tub, watching the sun set in a stunning display of orange. I hoped nothing would ruin my mountain lair later tonight. "Would you like to have the talk now?" she asked after the others went to the control room, and Doc took the kids to get ready for bed. They didn't know they would be sleeping in the bunker, and we'd save that for later. "I guess," I replied, "but I'm not sure it matters as much now that you are here with our kids." "Oh, believe me, I'm okay with leaving the past behind and focusing on now. I've lived it, regretted my choices for 5 years, and I still hope to turn back time. But I won't ever hide the truth from you again. Just ask me anything you want to know and I'll answer honestly. Did you love him? More importantly, do you still love him?" "No, never. Even when I was angry with you and ended up with him, I never loved him. It feels silly to say now, but I always loved only you. You are the only one I have ever truly loved." "Then why did it happen? I heard your explanation at La Kiva, but being mad at me doesn't seem like a good reason to do what you did." "My insurance company and I spent many thousands of dollars on a counselor trying to figure that out over 3 years. A lot of what she said sounded like nonsense, so I will give you a simple version in my own words. I'm an only child who was spoiled by my parents and my partners, especially my husband. I've always received special attention because of my looks. I haven't faced much disappointment, so when you left me for a while, I reacted poorly." That's what she said. "I didn't think about the fact that I was the one who urged you to take on more work to earn more money. I only felt lonely and overwhelmed with the kids. I know, only a spoiled person would think and act like I did. It was worse than childish. Our kids would have handled it better. A wiser woman would have talked to you about her worries instead of lashing out about your absence. I wanted everything, and when Robert offered me what I wanted, I made a bad choice. I had to learn the hard way, Rob. That taught me about disappointment, mistakes, and the consequences of my actions, and the difference between being with someone you love and someone who gives you nice things, but doesn't truly care. 5 years ago, I was a selfish, immature girl at 25. I should have been a responsible young woman focused on my children and my loving husband, not just my own loneliness. I'm not that person anymore. I know there are parts of her that you loved, and I want to keep those parts alive and growing. However, the selfishness I have been letting go of bit by bit for nearly 5 years. I don't hear her quiet voice anymore, so I believe she is gone for good. Everyone around me needs to stay alert and let me know if she shows up again. You seem to understand your issues pretty well, so good job to you and your counselor. A few thoughts? Yes, you were a bit spoiled, and I made it worse by trying hard to give you what you wanted and keep you happy. I knew this from the beginning, which is why I called you names like Princess Kate and Queen Caitlin. But you were so sweet, loving, and passionate about our family that I never thought it was a problem. That was my mistake. I should have noticed the signs and not assumed you would talk to me if something was wrong. I also messed up in how I handled your complaints about my absence. Instead of sitting down with you to explain where I was and why, I told you to just deal with it because I was working hard to provide for you. I should have warned you about my worries that Robert was leading the company into risky situations, but instead, I pointed out that his attention to you was more about his jealousy of me. That was foolish. You are beautiful, and he was drawn to you. I not only let you get close to him, but I also encouraged you to do so. There are more things I want to discuss, especially why you decided to find me, but I'm afraid we are running out of time. Just know that I'm not the same man I was back then. You've been here long enough to see the changes in me, and I think you already know, but I want to make it clear. If we get back together and you do something like that again, it won't be me who disappears. Do you understand? Yes, I completely understand. Now, what do you want me to do to get ready for what's coming? We will all be in the bunker for a while. Let's get an update and check on the kids. Good timing, Claude said when he saw me. I just talked to Sheriff Goodson a little while ago. He received a call from someone who claimed to be a general in the Texas Air National Guard. This general warned him that the Guard would be conducting live training exercises in the mountains northwest of town. There might be some loud noises and explosions, but there's no need to worry as it will be far from any homes or people. The sheriff has his new equipment ready, including a large armored vehicle, and he is on his way. Other than that, things are quiet, maybe too quiet. The drones haven't picked up anything, nor have the people watching the roads leading here. Our team is in place and ready, so we are still just waiting. Do you want to activate the early warning system? Sure. Let's do it, Claude. If they're coming, it will be soon. Is the dozer ready? Yep. It's right next to the bridge over the canyon. Carl parked it there with the remote just to check that it works. And it does. What about the Stinger teams? Carl replied. They are in place around the house. I've told them there is a potential air threat, as the sheriff mentioned. Are you all set to move this to the bunker? If the threat isn't coming up the road, we need to be inside. I'll make sure everything is good down there, then I'll call you, and we can move, Carl told Claude, who nodded. Claude used the radio to inform everyone in the field and the house that we were going downstairs, and then worked quickly on getting everything ready. Carl had already left, so I followed. Toro, Chap, Gatto, and Coyote had the kids and Caitlin in the kitchen waiting for me. Since Carl had entered through a different door, I led everyone through the pantry to the basement game room, opened the HVAC panel, guided them inside, and then closed the panel behind us. It was getting late, and the kids should have been tired by now, but they were wide-eyed and alert. Caitlin and the others showed them around while I assisted Carl in the command center. The locks down here worked with pass cards and eye scans, and 5 of us had the necessary access, including Carl and Claude. When everything was ready in the command center, I opened the armory and gave out tactical shotguns and pistols to Gatto, Toro, Chaparral, and Coyote. I also placed ARs at each spot, just in case we needed them. Carl was watching the radar screen when he suddenly looked up and said, "A helicopter has just taken off from a ranch near Marfa heading north. And 3 black vans left the ranch around the same time the helicopter took off," a watcher reported from the Marfa highway. "Showtime," Claude announced over the radio and then informed the sheriff, who had set up in a clearing in the Pinon Forest near the bridge for a good view of the road. Carl turned to me. "It looks like there's going to be a ground attack timed with an air attack from the back. We have 2 men on the hills beside the road. Do you want to load up on Stingers for the back or keep them in place just in case?" "I think we're fine for now, as long as it's just 1 helicopter. The team on the east will have the first shot if it comes from behind, but the southern and northern teams will have shots too. If it comes from another direction, 3 sides of our formation will still be ready. My only worry is what weapons they have and the distance they can reach. I'd rather not have to repair everything here, but whatever happens, happens. The main goal is for everyone to stay safe. To that end, I want Raimundo to have a talk with Ronaldo before things start. Can we do that, Chap?" "I'll call Tino," Chap answered. "How soon?" "As soon as you can set it up. Once the call is done, we switch from being hunted to being the ones in charge, so everyone needs to be prepared. In the meantime, watch the helicopter closely. If it has missiles, we might already be too late to prevent the attack." Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.